All right. Welcome, Roster Wars, to the United Nations Rookie Summit, Part 5. Today, we are going to be discussing the tight end class coming into the 2023 draft. I'm your host, Corbin, as always, joined with Ross and Tyler. How we doing, boys?
Fantastic.
Great.
And
So
Tyler,
you're
I
getting
love seeing that commercial that you got planned for us. That was some quality work right there. Except the writing was backwards, but
Well, yeah. What do you do, right? It's
yeah, low
camera.
production costs. I mean, that's a positive at least.
get your credit card details ready, folks.
Yeah, you're gonna want them. Tyler's got a
Believe
good
it or
one.
not, I get these things off the top of my head. They're not scripted.
No, I could tell. It was definitely right off the dome. Just right, yeah, right off the cuff. Not well thought through, but definitely something that you're not seeing anywhere else. Tyler's got some good advice for startups, so you might want to check that out halfway through here. But let's hop into it. Like I said, we're going to be discussing tight ends today. We've got four major guys that we want to cover. As always, we'll rank those for you and provide a sleeper apiece. So today we're going to be talking about Michael Mayer, Dalton Kincaid, Darnell Washington, and Luke Musgrave. So just four prospects to cover, but these guys have kind of started to separate themselves from the rest of this class. Overall, I'm really excited about this tight end group coming in this year. I think a lot of guys are going to be ready to play right off the bat and should be fantasy contributors right from the get-go, at least a few of them. So what were your overall impressions of this class?
Yeah, I'm on two minds because obviously tight ends in general, I absolutely hate, especially for fantasy. Every year I seem to pick one, and every year they take forever to break out and they don't work out. So yeah, these guys look like a good crop, but I'm not sure. I'm not confident in my personal ability to project them.
Yeah. What do you think, Tyler?
Oh, I enjoyed this class. I think there's tight ends are so hard to predict,
Mm-hmm.
You're either getting OJ Howard or Pat Fryermuth, right? Like
Yep.
I don't know. What college tight end can be, just great, but he might not do it in the NFL, right?
Kyle
So,
Pitts.
Yeah.
Kyle Pitts.
but there, these guys, like these guys, I find they're all very similar in their in the scouting. Like we're
Mm-hmm.
pretty much going to say the same about most of them, right?
Yep. Yeah, I feel
So,
like we were spoiled with Pat Fryermuth getting instant production out of him, but typically these tight ends do take 2-3 years to come into full form and be valuable, week in, week out fantasy contributors. There are definitely a couple of guys that I could see breaking that mold and at least, putting up like a top 20 fantasy season the rookie year and then top 10 potential sophomore season. So let's hop into it with this first prospect we're going into here. That is Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame. He's a 21-year-old junior coming out. He's 6'5", 249 pounds, so a little bit of a bigger guy. His RAS score was 7.61, so above average, not bad. 4.7 40-yard dash. He has average explosion and agility, nothing elite about that. But in terms of production, I mean, he was phenomenal the past 2 years. In 2022, this last season, he had 67 catches for 809 yards and 9 touchdowns. And in 2021, he had 71 catches for 840 yards and 7 touchdowns. So if you're looking for that All-American tight end coming out, like running or blocking, rather, run blocking, pass catching, I mean, he's the whole package. I thought he was a very well-rounded prospect.
Yeah, he got asked to do quite a lot in Notre Dame, and obviously he's produced from his freshman season, which is something you don't often see. So he's been like on the radar for a good few years. So yeah, Notre Dame is like think he might translate very well because he was asked to go in motion quite a lot, block in line. He was okay at run blocking, and he done a bit of pass blocking, and then obviously his receiving potential as well. He was split out wide as well as um, doing the normal tight end in line position. But I think he's a really big target, and he's got great hands. His hands are so good, and he's got the ball skills as well to just really go up there and get the ball. And he's really good in contested situations. I think, and he had the highest conversion rate in the class. So he had 26 contested catch targets, and 65% of them were converted. and the other guys in his class are around 50% is a good number. So you can see where he wins. I was a bit disappointed that he's run blocking, to be honest, because everything where you watch him like over the last few years, not intently, and you see, oh, he's a do it all tight end, and then you hear people talking about how he's good at everything. So I was expecting this elite dominant run blocker. I don't think he was that dominant. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't that dominant. So I think he maybe got that to work on at the next level. And the other thing that maybe puts me off is his price as well. So if he's going to get taken in the first round NFL draft, how high is he going to fantasy? And I just think he's maybe got a lower ceiling because he's not like an elite athlete. So I see him as like a Hayden Hurst type, who's maybe going to be around the NFL for a while, but not like produce at amazing levels. So maybe a bit down, but it's all relative to the price.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's kind of, very well-rounded. I think that he is a solid blocker. He's not the best in the class, but he's certainly not the worst. He's above average for sure. But I mean, he was asked to do a lot at Notre Dame the past 2 seasons, and he's came through, like you said, really good with those contested catches. He's solid, reliable hands, pretty good route runner too. But the thing is, he doesn't really have any elite traits. Like he's not the fastest. He doesn't really have that yards after catch ability. A little bit of a slow starter coming off of the line of scrimmage on the snap. So I think he's kind of just like a high floor, lower ceiling kind of guy. I think that he's going to be a really good NFL player, but for fantasy football specifically, I think there's some other guys that I would be targeting in this draft that I might prefer over him. He's definitely one of the best tight ends coming in. He should be able to get playing time all 3 downs right off the get-go because of his ability to block and to catch. And I mean, I know blocking doesn't really have anything to do with fantasy points, but it does have something to do with your ability to stay on the field and to be a rookie and having, that 3 down potential right off the get-go. I mean, that's something.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like he does everything adequate enough to stay on the field, right? He could be better at blocking, but I think his blocking is going to get him by in the NFL enough that he'll be a 3 down tight end. But one thing I noticed is that he's very hard to take down. Like watching the tape, he was, it'd take 1 or 2 guys to hit him to take him down, right? So I think he's probably going to be like a really good NFL tight end for a team, but possibly depending on his situation, he might not be fantasy relevant.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Kind of like maybe a Tyler Higbee, who I don't, show up one game but not the other kind of deal. They're kind of, I don't know if any of you have owned Tyler Higbee, but he'll have one good game and then disappear for 2 or 3.
I think that's a
And it's all
generic
because
tight
he
end.
has to do different things with his team, right? Depending on the game plan. So
Yep.
Yeah, I think there's a big level of tight ends after like tight end 5 or 6, all the way to like tight end 15, who are there like some big weeks, some not so big weeks. So yeah, I think he'll be a good red zone target, but and like a 3rd down target for maybe a rookie quarterback, because he's just like a big frame and he uses his body well as well to hold off defenders and make sure he can secure the catch when he needs to. So I think he'll be a reliable target, but like you said, maybe hit or miss depending if he gets a touchdown or not in fantasy.
And the other thing is too, Notre Dame didn't have the best competition. I mean, I'm looking at their schedule just for 2022. I mean, they had Ohio State, BYU, Syracuse, Clemson, USC at the very end. But I mean, maybe I didn't just watch a lot of Notre Dame football, but it seems like he was kind of the favorite in the passing game. And when you are playing, what's that?
He was like their whole offense, their whole passing offense anyway. They didn't have anything.
So
isn't that Notre Dame loves their tight ends, don't they?
Yeah. Well, they had Cole Kmet was the last big tight end to come out of there, I think.
Yeah, and then
But
Matt, go.
anyways, my point of just saying
Sorry.
that is, yeah, he has a lot of production, and I do like to see that coming out of college because there's a lot of guys that we'll even talk about here in a little bit that don't have that production, but they have the traits. And so I like Michael Mayer. I wouldn't be surprised if he's the first tight end taken in this class. But when you're looking at the NFL as a whole, you'll have 3 to 5 guys any given season that will give you elite numbers for a tight end. And then, 6 through 10 are separated by a couple of points, maybe. They're not real difference makers. So I could see him being a consistent guy that you can plug into your lineup week to week. But I don't see him being like a Mark Andrews or a Travis Kelce, and there are some other guys where I could absolutely see them being like that. I think he'll be like a reliable security blanket, like a chain mover. Maybe he'll get a couple touchdowns every year, but I don't just see him as some monster red zone target. I don't see him as like a 10 target, 12 target kind of guy every single game. I think he's just going to be steady, reliable. You can count on him every now and then, but like you said, Tyler, a guy who might not, he might lay a goose egg on a given week. So we'll see. I mean, I think he's a solid prospect. There's some other guys in here that I think might have a better opportunity to dominate the tight end landscape in terms of fantasy. So I like him better as an NFL tight end than a fantasy player. That's how I'll sum it up. So with that, let's move on here to our next guy. That's going to be Dalton Kincaid coming out of Utah. He's 23 years old, senior coming out. He's 6'3", 246 pounds. He did not test at the combine. He had a small fracture in his back. It was determined that surgery wasn't necessary, so he's still kind of recovering for that, and he is going to have a private workout to get some numbers before the draft. That's what I read at least, so we will see about that. But last year he had 70 catches for 890 yards and 8 touchdowns. And the year before, 2021, he had 36 catches for 510 yards and 8 touchdowns. So still very efficient in the end zone for his 2 years. Well, his last 2 years in Utah. I think he went to like South Dakota or some other school before he went there. He's a little bit of an
University
older
of San
prospect.
Diego.
San Diego it was? Okay. I saw SDS or something like that, so I kind of assumed. But yeah, a little bit of a fall off from, an upgrade, I guess, in terms of yards from 2021 to 2022. And he was obviously targeted more his senior year. Same touchdown productivity, but I really like this prospect. What do you guys think?
Yeah. This guy's probably the best blocker out of the group. Or not probably. He is the best blocker for passing and
Blocker?
running. Yeah, he's great at blocking.
Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah.
Why? I do not have that at all.
Well, that's the scouting report I got on him. So anyway, he doesn't have the only knock I got on him is that he doesn't have the speed. He doesn't have the speed that the other tight ends have. He's
Are you
he's
sure you looked at the right report?
yeah,
I don't
he's got
think so, dude.
speed, but that's all that I was watching film, but they don't really show a lot of blocks in film. But the scouting report, all they talk about is how good he is in pass blocking, how good he is in run blocking, how good he is in second level, like at the second level, like. So
See,
I don't know.
I don't know what you have, Ross, but I kind of have the opposite of that. I mean, I thought like this is my favorite player in the class in terms of for fantasy value. I mean, he's like a wide receiver tight end hybrid. He's that perfect wide tight end that you want to have in your fantasy drafts. I mean, he's a great route runner. I thought he had a great start off the line. He's fast, he's agile, real crisp in and out of his breaks. He has yard after the catch ability. And really good ball skills and hands too. In terms of being a receiver, I mean, he's the total package. The knocks I did have on him is he would struggle against some more physical defenders. They could kind of knock him off of his routes on occasion. I saw that on tape. And he's just definitely not a blocking tight end. I mean, he's a little bit undersized in terms of height and weight, but we don't have the combine testing numbers, the 40 and the agility and stuff like that. But if you're just watching, basing it strictly off tape, I mean, he's got it all. For a tight end, I was really impressed.
Yeah, I have exactly the same written down as you, Corbin. So he's very fluid as a mover, and you can tell he's got like really good athleticism, if not elite. You comparing him to Mayer, obviously he's night and day. He runs really smooth. And I did put a thing about in and out his breaks. He's really quick. He like puts one foot in the ground and he's in his break, and that's really good to sort of keep the defensive back guessing. Whereas other
Yep.
tight ends like take a couple of steps and they don't create as
Oh, I
much
gotta take this
separation.
for a sec.
Okay.
Anyways,
Yeah.
he's
with
he's
you.
a really natural catcher, and like he's only dropped 2 out of the 70 catches he had this year, and that's like the best in the class out of all these guys we're talking about. And I thought he was a better blocker than I was expecting as well. He spent like 55% of his snaps in the slot, and so I was expecting like a Mike Gesicki level blocker, but he's a little bit better than that. Obviously, has a lot to do at the next level, and like you said, he can be a bit more physical. He doesn't use his body as much as you would like for a tight end for someone as big as him. And he is like a big wide receiver, and that has a lot of value, like you said, especially in fantasy. Those are the guys who want the target hog, who's maybe get 100 targets a season. He does have that potential.
Yep. Yep. I really love his ceiling. And I think that he can come in and be a solid contributor right away. And it's not like he's just like, it's not like he can't block at all.
Yeah,
But that is
that's
not
what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay.
like he is definitely below Michael Mayer in terms of blocking. Like he is definitely going to be a pass catching tight end for his first couple of years. And that is something he'll have to work on. Now there's plenty of tight ends in the league that are primarily just pass catchers, the bigger body, the mismatch kind of guy. And that's what he can present. But I do kind of question how he's going to handle the physicality of NFL defensive players. I mean, he's playing in the Pac-12, not really known for their defensive prowess by any means. So, I mean, obviously, every prospect you're going to have questions with him. But if you're looking at a tight end that you want for fantasy football purposes, this is the guy. In a tight end premium league, I mean, I don't see him getting out of the first round, really. Hey, he's kind of like right at the tail end right there. He's right because once you get past that first tier of wide receivers, you got 2, maybe 3 running backs and the quarterbacks. I mean, he's going to be like a fringe first round, early second round kind of guy. And with some of the other guys, I think there's a lot of upside too. But I think that you could see him turning into a top 5 fantasy tight end for a long time.
Do you want to hear one of the scouting reports I read
Yes, I would.
on his strengths?
Where's this from?
I'm not going to tell you my source. Strengths: excellent pass protection.
I don't want to know,
Good
anyways.
pass protection. Strong run blocker. 3-down starter. Can sustain his blocks. Hits blocks on the second level. Can good blocking technique. Long-term starting potential.
I agree with the long-term starting potential. I didn't
Then
really
the
see
thing-
him like as an inline tight end though. Like Ross said, you saw him out in the slot a lot. You would see him crack down on some linebackers, but being able to just come off the line and move a defensive end, I just don't think he's going to be that kind of guy. He's going to need support throughout a lot of his career, and he might not ever turn into that guy.
The only weaknesses they have on him are not fast and it lacks elite speed and athleticism.
Dalton
Sorry,
Kincaid.
Athleticism. Lacks elite athleticism.
I think you need to find another scout that you trust there.
They
Tyler.
also say his quickness and athleticism. He has deceptive and he has shows burst and route running after the catch. Anyway, they kind of compare him to Dawson Knox.
Okay.
Anyway,
Well,
we can
I
agree
guess
to
we'll
disagree.
see. Yeah, I guess we will. We'll see where you
This
have
is
him
what
in the
we do.
rankings here.
You have your
Yeah.
sources, I have mine.
We'll see. It'll be interesting to see where he goes in roster wars, but I think that he's definitely going to be at the top of the list for sure. I don't think there's any questioning that. We'll see what happens when he does test. That is TBD, just because of that back fracture that I mentioned. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. We haven't seen the last of him before we hit the draft here. So let's move on to our next guy. And this guy had no problem blowing things up at the combine, and that is Darnell Washington out of Georgia. He's 21 years old, coming out as a junior, 6'7", 6'6.5", I guess, but 264 pounds. His RAS score was a 9.88 out of 10, so a freak athlete. He ran a 4.64 40, really good explosion scores. He did have like a 31-inch vertical, but He's got the height and the arm length to mitigate that, and he had really good agility too. He didn't do the 3-cone drill, but he was solid on the shuttle. I think that was an elite score there. Not a lot of college production. He had 28 catches last year for 454 yards and 2 touchdowns. And in 2021, he had 10 catches for 154 yards and 1 touchdown. So obviously coming from Georgia, one of the best teams in all of college football the last couple of years, you could pretty much go with anybody that you wanted. They had George Pickens the year before. They always have a solid running game. So still not the production that you want to see for a top prospect, but in terms of traits, I mean, he's got everything that you want.
Yeah, and I think if you were to pick a position in the NFL that had the elite athleticism and like very minimal production, and it would still translate to success, is probably tight end. We've seen so many guys not have much, even maybe not play the position. They played wide receiver, or Antonio Gates didn't even play football. But yeah, so I see the exact same thing. I think he's when the first thing you think about him when you think about Darnell Washington is his blocking ability. So he's the one with a great run blocking, great pass blocking, and he's just so dominant. And that's in the SEC. And he's doing it against defensive ends, and he's doing it against linebackers, and he's almost like a sixth offensive lineman at times. And I think that's what NFL teams are really going to covet as well, especially teams that maybe don't have the best offensive lineman. Get Washington in, then he's a dual threat, and because he does have that elite athleticism, and he's made some of the, although he had like what 28 catches, I think, as you said, he's got some of the most wow plays I've seen out the guys we're going to talk about. Like he's hurdling defenders. I think it was against Oregon. He was hurdling someone, and then obviously in the combine, I know he's playing in shorts, but he had like one-handed catch, right, twisting and turning. He's got the body control to sort of utilize that massive wingspan. He's got the massive hands as well to just pluck the ball out the air. And it's really, the ceiling is like, there is no ceiling. It's he could be whatever he wants to be. I really think that he's got the highest ceiling out of everyone in this class.
Well, yeah, I mean, in a way, I agree with you, but at the same time, I do see him, like, I love him as an NFL player. Like, he deserves to be in the conversation of the number 1 tight end in the class. But in terms of fantasy, at best, I just see him as a touchdown dependent kind of guy. Like, he is a mismatch against any linebacker or any defensive end just due to that athleticism and the size that he has. But you don't really see that run after catch ability. I mean, if you're targeting him in the red zone, I mean, he could be scoring 10 plus touchdowns a game, and that would not, or not a game, a season. And that wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. But
what scouting report are you reading that he's getting 10 plus touchdowns a game? Wow.
Per season, my bad. I'll back
anyway,
that up.
I was gonna say that my scouting report says that he's a horrible blocker, but then that would just be funny.
You need to find a new scout, dude. That is so wrong.
I just said I'm joking. Of course, he's probably the best blocker out of this group.
Yeah,
and but I think like he opened I think he opened some eyes on what he could possibly do on the offensive side of the ball at the combine. So we'll see if that helps him in fantasy for the offensive side. But yeah, I think he's going to be a red zone beast. Like, it depends on the team he goes to, though, for fantasy. Because it depends on if they're a team that uses, tight ends in red zone like that, or if he's just going to be blocking in the red zone.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, if you have him, you got to.
I've seen the comparison of Mercedes Lewis.
Yep, that's what I had too, actually. That's kind of my concern, is that he's used like I think that he will be one of the better tight ends in this class in terms of NFL value, but Mercedes Lewis for fantasy, not really relevant at all. Sure, he's going to be hauling in like some relevant weeks, but at the same time, that does kind of scare me. Like, if he does eventually turn into just that blocking tight end, because he's borderline an offensive tackle. The way he moves and how he that he can move people. I mean, that is something that nobody else in this class really has. I have no questions, and there's no doubt in my mind that he will succeed in the NFL as a blocker.
Pretty fast for a big guy then.
Yeah, I mean, he does have that straight line speed, but at the same time, you don't really see that yards after catch. And he's not the best route runner either, from what I saw. Like game speed, like yeah, he tested well at the combine, but you don't see him like with breakaway speed and that yards after catch ability. So I think that he is going to be an instant mismatch coming into the NFL, and he should see some red zone targets every single season. But I'm afraid that if he can't develop that part of his game and really refine his routes and be more of just like a jump ball kind of guy, that could really limit his ceiling as a fantasy contributor. So
Has Mercedes Lewis gone to the Jets yet?
I don't think so. He's been
I
what,
know
Jaguars,
he's on the
Packers.
Rodgers.
Yeah,
Spiritually,
maybe.
he's with the Jets. Spiritually, just like Aaron Rodgers is at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe he'll pull him in too. But I mean, he's got to be what, like 36?
Surely he's
I don't know.
40 by now. Surely.
Really?
Feels like he's been
Jeez.
playing forever.
Yeah, man.
2006, maybe. I think he got
Yeah.
drafted.
So
Don't know
I
why
wouldn't be
remember that.
surprised if Darnell Washington can pan out to be a kind of guy like that. But it's just fantasy football. I love him as a prospect and as a player. Like, I think that he could be a first round pick, early second round pick, no doubt. But I do have questions about what he can contribute in terms of a fantasy football player. That's all. Like, I wouldn't be
Yeah, I agree with
surprised if
that.
he is a crazy red zone threat, but I don't see him having like over 1,000 yards in a season, like an 80 catch kind of guy. I don't see that. I could see him having, 40 catches for 10 touchdowns and like 400, 500 yards maybe, which is good, but at the same time might be a little bit more touchdown dependent. And the goal in fantasy football is to find the guy who can, produce elite numbers week in and week out. And I think he might be boomer bust depending on the week. So that's my only concern with him. But let's get to our last prospect on the list we're going to talk about today. That's going to be Luke Musgrave out of Oregon State. He's 22 years old, senior coming out, a little bit of an older prospect, but he's a bigger guy, 6'5", 253 pounds, and he has the RAS score to back it up. Not quite the athleticism as Darnell Washington, but pretty damn close. He scored a 9.78 out of 10. He ran a 4.6 140, elite explosion, pretty decent agility scores too. But very similar to Darnell Washington, not a whole lot of college productivity. Last year, he had 11 catches for 169 yards and a touchdown, but I do think that he only played 2 games. Yeah, 2 games this last season, so only 11 for 169. So pretty good for 2 games, I guess. But the year before, 2021, he had 22 catches for 304 yards and a touchdown. So I really like the traits that he has. I like the athleticism, but again, not a lot of college productivity. He does have a bit of an injury history, and there's not a big sample size. Only 1 season with over 350 snaps, and that was in 2021. So small sample size, like the player, like the prospect, but there's definitely some question marks there.
Yeah, he's going to be an offensive threat, depending on system he goes to, but yeah, he's terrible at blocking. So I don't see him as a 3-down tight end at all. But I mean, if he can work on that blocking, he could become the best guy coming out of this class just because of the offensive upside that he has. So Ross?
Yeah, well, I agree in terms of ceiling, but I think he's a lot further away from his ceiling than a lot of the other guys in this group. And you mentioned the production, and it's different from Darnell Washington because Washington was on the field and he was playing and he was just mostly blocking, whereas Musgrave just wasn't healthy. And he had a knee injury this year, obviously, two games, and he was looking really promising, like to have a fully elite season. But yeah, he just can't stay healthy. What I do like about him is that he's obviously his athleticism. He was a multi-sport athlete at high school. Quite a unique multi-sport athlete. He played football, but he played lacrosse as well. So he's obviously going to be a patriot.
Yeah,
and then
that's what I thought when you said that.
triple jump in the skiing as well. So he's obviously, I don't know if you need good hips to be a skier. Is that the defining trait you need as a skier? But
You got to have some
yes,
smooth hips, that's for sure.
It's
smooth
very
hips.
hard on the hips and upper thighs.
Yeah, and he's he's got good bloodlines as well. So his dad was
Yep.
a college quarterback, and Bill Musgrave is obviously a long-time NFL offensive coordinator, and that's his uncle. And I really like that in players, because they've been around sort of professional athletes for their entire life. They know how to sort of the intangible side of things. They normally always have, like how to work as a professional athlete and things like that. So I don't really have any concerns from that level. So yeah, I like him as a player, but the talk of him going in the first round, I think that's just absolute bananas. I mean,
Yeah.
tight end is not a premium position, and then you've got a guy who has barely played in college. He's got a lot of good traits, but that's a second at best. Third round kind of guy, I'd be feel really comfortable taking him, and that's
Mhm.
just like a bet on the traits.
Yeah, for me, I kind of put Kincaid and Mayer in the same tier. You know, they have the productivity, good athletes. Like those are the guys who are going to be, you know, first round quality prospects. But then you look at Darnell Washington and Luke Musgrave, like freak athletes, like great traits, but there is a lot of risk involved in terms of NFL value and for fantasy. And I think with Darnell Washington, it's more, you know, his route running ability. And with Luke Musgrave, you don't have those concerns, but it is the injury concerns because with that knee injury, I couldn't find anywhere exactly what the knee injury was. It was very vague. And even when he was at the combine and asked about it, he never said it was a torn ACL or anything like that. So I don't think anybody really knows other than him the exact nature of that injury, which is, you know, a little bit of a red flag, but not, you know, not like pulling him off the draft board or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, he's an elite athlete. You mentioned the NFL bloodlines, and for some reason, like I don't really know how to quantify it, but I really do like a Joey Porter Jr. Like I do consider that when I am looking at prospects, because like you said, they do have some of those intangibles. They have been taught at a young age, like what the expectations are. And I mean, his uncle, he was actually he won a Super Bowl as a backup quarterback. He was like maybe started one game in his entire career, so nothing like crazy or anything, but you know, it also goes to show, you know, maybe some football IQ there. And I haven't talked to him or heard the interviews or anything like that, but he had a really good Senior Bowl. Actually, he was one of the greatest standouts at the Senior Bowl, and he was clocked at 20 miles an hour at one point during the drills. So that's impressive. My notes here: he's a smooth route runner. He's really good at separating from coverage. He's really good at tracking the ball. He's got reliable hands, good potential for yards after the catch, but the concerns are obviously the production, the injury history, and then he needs some work as a blocker too. That could prevent him from seeing some playing time early on. But in terms of traits, not a whole lot of knocks on him. It's just like the injuries and the production concerns. I think that he could be a very valuable fantasy contributor, high ceiling kind of guy, but also wouldn't be surprised if he was a total bust just due to the injuries and the lack of production. So I like the prospect overall. I don't see him entering the first round here. He'll be like a second, third round kind of guy. A little
His
bit of a
yeah,
project.
he comes from a long line of mutters. That's the main thing. Like his mother was a mutter, his grandfather was a mutter, his grandmother was a mutter. They're all mutters.
All
Like
mutters.
he's not gonna fail in the mud. No, but I did see a comparison and the description of him fits to a T of Mike Gesicki. So that's my comparison that I seen. That's
Yeah, I
somebody
mean,
else comparing to.
I wouldn't be surprised if he evolves into a valuable fantasy contributor at some point. I don't think that he is going to have a lot of value for the first year or two, as opposed to like Kincaid, Mayer, Washington. I could see them being, you know, a guy that you could throw in a pinch right off the get go. But with him, I think you're probably going to want to stash him on the taxi squad for a year, see what you got in him. You know, maybe you can make something happen. But I like the prospect overall. Sometimes you got to take a risk in those later rounds. And, you know, this is a guy I could see probably going in like the third round in our rookie draft. I wouldn't be surprised by that. It is a very deep tight end class overall, but he's kind of the beginning of that second tier of guys for me, anyway. So what do you guys think about these guys overall? We want to go through some rankings here.
Start then. I have probably similar to you, Dalton Kincaid, Michael Mayer, Luke Musgrave, and then Darnell Washington. I think Washington, I absolutely love him as an NFL player, but you're right, and the way he's going to be used at the NFL, is not translate to fantasy success.
Yep. I like the rankings. Tyler, what do you got? Kincaid last?
No, that's what my
Okay.
scout says. No, actually, I based upon who I like, who I think or upside could be the best fantasy value. I got Washington, Kincaid, uh, Meyer, and Musgrave.
Okay.
The last two are hard to
Well,
write because my pen ran out. So that's just scratching my paper. But yeah,
see, for me, Washington would be probably the, like, if I was talking NFL draft, like as a GM, I would probably put Washington maybe second behind Mayer first, then Washington. But
that
for
changes when
fantasy,
you get drafted by Detroit. So
maybe. Well, when you got Jared Goff thrown to you, anything could happen. But for me, for fantasy rankings, I've got Kincaid number 1, Michael Mayer 2, Luke Musgrave 3, and Darnell Washington 4. So I'm right in line with you there, Ross. I just like that Musgrave's ability to do it all as a receiver. And I do think that he could get some red zone targets as well. But when I'm scouting tight ends, I want a guy that can consistently contribute. Like, I'd rather have a guy who could score 10 points every single week as opposed to a guy who's scoring 21 week and 0 in another. So that's kind of the difference between Musgrave and Washington for me. I think Kincaid's a no-brainer number 1 in terms of fantasy. I think that he's the most well-rounded prospect. He can contribute right away. Michael Mayer, I do have some questions about him, but I do think that he's a solid overall guy. And then the other two guys, like I said, it was tough between Musgrave and Washington, but I like my tight ends to have some consistency. And that's one of the positions that I favor the most in fantasy football, whether it's just a PPR league, non-tight end premium, like it doesn't matter. I always want to have a solid tight end because that could be a difference maker in winning
that's
and
what she
losing
said.
leagues. Yeah. But running out of time here, so let's take a quick break and we will be back with our sleepers. Let's end her here.
1,000, 1,001, 1,002, 1,003, 1,004, and 1,005. Oh, you're here. Oh, good place to stop. Doctor says not to overdo it. I did over 1,000. Anyway, I'm coming to you today with a special treat. It's my book of insider information, Coney's Draft Guide for $19.99. Now this book is going to tell you everything I do leading up to a draft, whether a dispersal draft, a startup draft, a rookie draft, but it's really, really, really insightful. Like, so when you open the book, I start off with the QB1s right there. That's the first page, QB1. Now, mainly in the startup, if you're starting up and you're like, I don't know who to pick, I need a QB, like it's a super flex. Who's the QB that I'm taking? Well, pick one, Jared Goff. Whoa! I blew your mind with that one. And then it's, well, basically Jared Goff or bust. But there's so much more in this book. So much more. Like, and then you go to the next page and there's just tons. Like, this is all the stuff. Like, I'm just, so much more. Like, look at that. Oh, just great stuff. Look at that. And, I mean, you're gonna have to buy the book. You're gonna have to buy the book. You can't just get it for free. Anyway, that should help you with the draft. Happy hunting.
Okay, welcome back, guys. I hope you enjoyed that commercial courtesy of Tyler. His draft guide is on sale for $19.99. His email, his phone number is available on the forum. Feel free to look that up, shoot him a DM, text, whatever you got to do. But you better get your hands on that book quick because I'm sure they're going to be flying off the shelves.
Yep.
Yeah, I like the Jared Goff part. Loved it. It was a little pandering to me, I'm guessing.
Rising in ADP.
Yes, sir. Day by day.
This steak in the oven.
Get him now while he's hot off the press. But let's wrap it up here. We'll give you a couple of our sleepers, some later round guys. And I actually came prepared this time. I have 2 sleepers because I feel like Ross or Tyler, you've been stealing my guy every single week. So I implore you to try and take one of my guys this time. Ross, who do you got for us?
I'll see if I can take your guy. I like Tucker Kraft out of San Diego State.
Good
He's
thing I
a
brought 2.
Did you say Tucker Kraft?
I
Yes.
did say Tucker Kraft, yeah. He is
That
he's
was
your guy as well.
that was my guy, and then I was like, I better pick a backup just in case one of them takes him.
Good thing,
So
because I think we're all in agreement then. We love Tucker Kraft. I see him as a very athletic pass catching tight end, and like that's what you need for fantasy as a pass catchers, as we've talked about quite a lot. I thought he was quite a good blocker as well, but that's at the FCS level. So he was at South Dakota State, and we'll see how that translates to the next level. I thought he had really strong sort of run after the catch ability as well, and he does use his physicality. And you can see like at that level of competition that he is like a lot better player than some of the guys there as well. And the other little tidbit as well, thinking back to South Dakota State tight ends, is Dallas Goedert was the last one to be taken in the NFL. And then I was looking up the measurables as well, and they're like almost exactly the same person, like physically. So 6'4", both 6'4". Tucker Kraft's 254 pounds. Dallas Goedert's 256 pounds. We've done a 34 and a 35 in the vertical, 10-foot broad jumps, 429 in the shuttle, 431 in the shuttle, and 708 and 702 in the 3-cone. So like they're exact same person. I think Dallas Goedert was a bit better for me, thinking back to when he was coming out. But I really love Tucker Kraft, and I hope he lands somewhere good, and maybe the 3rd round of the draft, we'll say. And he's one of my favorite guys in the entire class.
Yeah. Yeah, I like him. He's definitely a guy that you could have considered, one of the top 4 tight ends with Musgrave and Washington up there. I put him in the same tier as those guys. I think that there's another guy. He was actually my backup. My true sleeper is still here, so I'm probably going to go next. So I won't even give Tyler a chance to take him. But yeah, like you said, Ross, he's a freak athlete, a 968 RAS score. Somewhat decent production, a little bit of a fall off this year in terms of stats, I guess, but he had 65 catches, 773 yards, and 6 touchdowns in 2021. So that's pretty good production despite being from a smaller school. I mean, yes, he might not have as stout a competition in terms of going against defenders at that level, but also you got to think like the quarterback and the offensive lineman, the rest of his team, they're not as talented as some of those FBS schools. So, I do kind of like those prospects. They might not be quite on your radar, but the guy that I'm going to go with for my sleeper is Sam Laporta from Iowa. And that's because he is from Iowa, and Iowa tight ends always work out. Everybody knows that. It's tight end university. So you better get him right now. But the difference between Laporta and Tucker Kraft isn't that big. I think that Laporta is a little bit more athletic fantasy contributor than Tucker Kraft. I like Kraft as a blocker. He's a little bit stronger than Laporta, but he is also a little bit slower. So I think that's kind of the main difference between them, but they're both freak athletes, similar size, I guess. I mean, Laporta's 6'3", 245, so a little bit undersized, but he had a 9.5 RAS score. He's faster with a 4.59, so a tenth of a difference for the 40-yard dash. And then he had elite explosion and agility too. So the only real knock on him is he's a little bit undersized. He can improve in making some contested catches, and that just kind of comes with a size thing. Like, he's not that jump ball specialist. He's not the best blocking tight end. He's solid, but he didn't have a ton of red zone production. I think that's mostly due to size, but that's kind of the mold that I like to see in my tight end. He has a big route tree. He's a good route runner. He has the yards after catch ability. He tracks the ball in the air well and adjusts when it's needed, and he's got great hands. So I could see him turning into, a 6, 7, 8 reception kind of guy per game, and the touchdowns will come with that. You don't need to be that big body tight end, like jump ball specialist to get touchdowns. I do think that he has potential to be a red zone target, and I like the athleticism a little bit better. I wouldn't be surprised if Tucker Kraft's a better NFL tight end But in terms of fantasy football, I think Laporta is the guy I would give the nod to, just slightly. They're very, very similar prospects in my mind.
Yeah, I like him.
I take
He's a bit different from the other Iowa tight ends, or the type. When you think of Iowa tight ends, you maybe think of the big blocking guys, but he is more of a finesse receiver kind of guy out. But like I said, he's in a good spot for the fantasy thing, and I really like him as a pass catcher. Yeah, he's up there for me as well.
Yep. Did I take yours, Tyler?
No, you didn't, because I went farther
Thank
down
God.
the list for my backup, because I figured, this guy wouldn't be taken by anybody. I got Will Mallory from Miami. He's 6'5", 239. He ran the best 40 time at the combine at 4.54. Now he's projected for around 4 to 6. But they apparently, like the scouting report says, the scouts are down on him, but he has the potential to get better. His blocking isn't up to par at all, but with the speed, he can develop on his receiving skills and his route running. He's the type of guy that I think you can pick in a later round and stash him on your taxi squad, and maybe with the right coaching and the right team, he could become a fantasy relevant tight end for you in a few years from now, just because of the speed and everything. And you can't really teach speed, but you can work on the other stuff that he doesn't have. So
yeah. That's a guy I'll have to look into a little bit more, because I haven't really dug in on him much. There's a couple other guys I just wanted a quick mention. Payne Durham from Purdue. He was a standout at the Senior Bowl. I like him as a pass catching option. Zach Kuntz from Old Dominion, bigger guy, but still has some potential for catch and run situations. And then Cameron Latu, that's a guy who's kind of been on my radar a little bit. Was that the guy? I think that's the guy. I'm looking at the list here. But yeah, the Alabama tight end. But I've heard a little bit more on him. I just started to look into him a little bit, so don't know too much about him yet, but that's a guy on my radar. Luke Schoonmaker from Michigan, too. That's a guy who beat the hell out of the Spartans. I think that he might be like a 5th or 6th round kind of guy, but he was a pretty solid target for him, honestly. I like him a lot.
Coming out this year?
What's that?
Is Latu, did he declare this year, or?
There was a Alabama tight end.
Or is that Latu next year?
Yeah, it is Latu. Yeah, that's the guy I'm thinking of. I just saw him mock to the Lions in like the 4th or 5th round or something like that. So I was like, that's somebody that wasn't really on my radar. I got to look into him, but
I like Schoonmaker.
like I said,
I like the chants that come from the stands when every time he catches the balls, like Schoon. That's the funnest part of his evaluation for me.
Yeah, I watched him beat the hell out of the Spartans this year, and that stuck with me. And then every other game that I watched Michigan play, I mean, he was always a factor in those games. So he's the kind of tight end that I like to see. And I think that he could be a good sleeper there if we're getting really deep down in there, but probably just a taxi squad guy until he proves otherwise. But yeah, anybody else you guys wanted to mention, or should we wrap this bad boy up?
Quite a lot.
Anybody excited? Everybody excited for RFA? Huh?
Yeah, I'm ready. The deadline is passed. They're locked in. Sorry, I couldn't do that Aaron Donald and Chris Jones swap with you there, Ross, but
I thought it was interesting. I thought it was a bit creative on my end when I was just reading through the comp tags. I thought it was obviously, I don't know. We'll see how high they go. Well, you won't see how high Donald goes, but we'll see how high Chris Jones goes in RFA.
Yeah, I had my own strategy as to why, but we'll see.
Thanks for the list there, Ross, and thanks for trying to give me 10 extra Warbucks.
Oh, I'll try my best. I'm trying my best. Would you believe
I'll go with your list over. I could use those 10 extra Warbucks. I know. Maybe all these Chicago fans will go for Darnell Mooney now that he's going to be 1,000-yard receiver again.
You know, it's a good strategy. If I had Jared Goff, he'd be straight in the comp tag just for the Lions fans. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have snatched him up real quick. It would have been a duel between Tyler and I.
For who?
But let's wrap it up with that, guys. Thanks so much for listening. We've got 2 more installments to go before we finish off here. Obviously, we've got running backs left, everybody's favorite. We're going to be saving that one for last. Next week, we'll be going through defensive tackles and defensive backs, combining those two, obviously, just because defensive backs, not a ton of safeties, not a ton of value in terms of fantasy for us and roster wars. And then defensive tackles, there's a couple of main guys that we wanted to address there. So we'll see you next week, guys. Thanks for listening.
Adios.
What's up?